Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a powerful idea today, one that fundamentally challenges how many of us think about faith, personal commitment, really, what it truly means to live a life of conviction. Imagine, if you will, a call to live so authentically, so completely, that it demands, well, everything from you, a complete reorientation of your entire being. That's really the heart of what we're exploring. Our mission today is to understand a crucial distinction made by the German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a man whose life, profoundly exemplified his teachings amidst the brutal Nazi regime. He asked this vital question, one that cuts to the core of any deeply meaningful pursuit. What is the difference between cheap grace and costly grace? And, this isn't just about theology, it's about the very nature of true commitment to anything that holds deep purpose in your life, whether that's spiritual, relational, or personal.
Right. And what's fascinating here is how Bonhoeffer's framework, though, yes, deeply rooted in a specific Christian context, it provides an incredibly powerful lens. A lens through which we can examine commitment, sacrifice, and true transformation across, well, a wide array of spiritual paths and even secular philosophies. It really pushes us to consider what truly constitutes a life of profound purpose. And perhaps more uncomfortably, why do we so often shy away from its inherent demands? So throughout this deep dive, we'll be looking at how various traditions articulate this cost of genuine spiritual growth, something that really echoes Bonhoeffer's radical stance.
Absolutely. So, what kind of faith or commitment genuinely transforms you? What are you willing to give? Or maybe what are you willing to give up for it? What is the actual price of a truly transformed life? Let's find out. Okay, before we fully immerse ourselves in these other wisdom traditions, let's make sure we've truly grounded ourselves in Bonhoeffer's central concept. He's often remembered for, well, a stark, uncompromising vision of what it means to truly follow a calling. What was he seeing in his time that made him so passionate about this idea of costly grace?
Yeah, it's clear Bonhoeffer wasn't just theorizing in a vacuum. He was reacting to a very specific dilution of grace he observed within the church of his time, particularly under the, encroaching shadow of Nazism. He felt that many had embraced a comfortable, almost effortless version of faith.
Effortless, right.
Yeah, which he starkly labeled cheap grace. For Bonhoeffer, this cheap grace was grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ, living and incarnate. It was kind of spiritual consumerism almost, if you will, where the benefits were sought without the corresponding commitment.
Like getting the reward without the work.
Exactly. Imagine a church offering forgiveness and salvation as just a blanket reassurance, requiring nothing more than, say, intellectual assent, without challenging individuals to radically change their lives, especially when facing immense evil. That was his deep concern.
That makes perfect sense. So if cheap grace was this diluted, easy come, easy go version, this spiritual consumerism, what did Bonhoeffer mean by costly grace? How did he articulate something so, well, profoundly challenging, especially when many people associate grace with being a free, unmerited gift?
Well, his definition of costly grace is intensely demanding. It centers on the idea of a profound interplay between grace and active obedience. He directly states, grace and active obedience are complementary. You see, for Bonhoeffer, these aren't two separate concepts that might, occasionally overlap. They are two sides of the same coin, inseparable, mutually defining.
Okay, two sides of the same coin.
Right. He asserts that there is no faith without good works, and no good works apart from faith. This just cuts through any notion of passive belief, any idea that you can simply believe without that belief manifesting in tangible action and a transformed life. It's an assertion that true faith produces action. It doesn't just sit idly by.
That's a powerful statement. Grace and active obedience are complementary. It sounds almost counterintuitive, doesn't it, to some traditional understandings of grace as purely a free gift? How does Bonhoeffer bridge that potential disconnect, especially for someone who might feel overwhelmed by the idea of active obedience in addition to receiving grace? And what does it really mean to say there's no faith without good works? Does he see a direct link between, say, a reluctance to act and a shallow understanding of grace itself?
Absolutely, he does. Bonhoeffer challenges what he calls qualms about good works, by which we only try to excuse ourselves and justify our evil works.
So avoiding the work is actually a way of justifying inaction.
Exactly. It implies that a reluctance to engage in good works, or any spiritual effort, isn't a sign of pure grace. He saw it as a symptom of a shallow understanding of what grace truly is, an evasion, really, a way to justify remaining in a comfortable, untransformed state. He wasn't suggesting that good works earn grace, that's crucial. But that grace, when truly received, transforms the recipient. It compels them to live differently. Think of it this way. If a gift empowers you to perform some great feat, and you then refuse to perform it, are you truly honoring the gift?
That's a great analogy.
For Bonhoeffer, grace isn't merely a legal pardon. It's a call to a new life, a new purpose. It's dynamic.
So this immediately begs the question, how does Bonhoeffer reconcile this insistence on good works with those who might emphasize grace as purely a free gift, fearing that any talk of works implies earning salvation? There's a delicate theological balance there, isn't there?
It's a crucial point, absolutely. And Bonhoeffer addresses this correctly by clarifying the purpose of new creation in Christ. He often quoted Ephesians 2, verses 8 to 10, which state, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, that no man should glory. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God afore prepared that we should walk in them."
Right, I remember that passage.
This passage is critical because it's not about earning salvation through good works. Instead, it posits that salvation itself is a recreation for good works. The gift of grace, far from negating the need for action, actually empowers and directs a new way of living a life of active obedience.
Ah, I see. So the works are the result of the grace, not the cause of it.
Precisely. It's about understanding that grace is transformative at its very core. It doesn't just forgive the past, it fundamentally redesigns the future, the purpose of the person.
That's a profound distinction. So grace isn't just a passive reception. It's an activation, an internal shift that fundamentally changes what you are meant to do. It's less a get-out-of-jail-free card and more. More like an empowerment for a new way of living, a new purpose.
Exactly. It's the engine for purpose. The gift of God leads directly to being his workmanship for a specific active purpose. It just underscores that grace isn't a means to avoid responsibility. It's the very fuel for fulfilling one's transformed purpose. And furthermore, Bonhoeffer points to the imperative of the Last Judgment. He states, "We shall be judged according to our works. It is vitally important that we should be trained to do good works."
Wow, that's direct.
Very. But he clarifies it is evil works rather than good works which hinder and destroy faith. This directly contradicts any notion that, focusing on good works is somehow a burden or a distraction from genuine faith. For him, evil works aren't just external acts. They are internal failures to live out the transformation that grace offers. And that ultimately erodes faith from within.
That's a stark warning against spiritual complacency, isn't it? It means our actions aren't separate from our faith, but are actually an integral part of its expression, its verification almost. So if you claim to have received grace, but your life shows no evidence of positive outward change, then something is, well, amiss.
Indeed. This perspective implies that truly accepting grace means accepting its inherent demand for a transformed, active life. A life where the pursuit of good is paramount. It's not about earning salvation in some transactional sense, but demonstrating the reality of one's transformed state. Our works become the outward manifestation of the inner reality of grace.
Okay.
And this isn't just about avoiding sin. It's about actively pursuing virtue, embodying a new creation. It's the daily, conscious choice to live into the grace you've received, to make it costly, not cheap.
Okay, so if grace demands active obedience and good works, what does that actually feel like on a personal level? What kind of inner transformation does this kind of costly commitment entail? What are we being asked to give up or, to truly embrace this kind of radical change?
Well, when we connect this to the bigger picture, many spiritual traditions across diverse cultures and times highlight the radical nature of true spiritual transformation. It's often described as a process that feels like a stripping away of the old self, a kind of death before rebirth, you could say.
A stripping away.
Yeah. This isn't just about changing habits. It's about a fundamental reorientation of one's entire being. And that often demands an immense personal cost. We can see this call to radical transformation illustrated beautifully in C.S. Lewis's analogy of the egg, from Mere Christianity.
Oh, yeah, the egg analogy. Remind us.
Lewis provides this powerful metaphor, saying, it may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It would be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining an egg. We are like eggs at present. And you cannot go on and definitely being just an ordinary, decent egg. We must be hatched or go bad.
That analogy perfectly captures the unavoidable nature of this transformation, doesn't it? You can't just stay comfortable and expect to achieve a higher state of being. You have to undergo a complete change, a metamorphosis. What are the specific shell comforts people cling to, do you think? And what are the perceived dangers or discomforts of hatching?
That's a really insightful question. The shell comforts
Well, they're often our familiar habits, aren't they?
Sure.
Self-definitions, our routines, maybe even our comfortable vices, our grievances. These are the things that keep us feeling secure, perhaps, albeit limited. And the perceived dangers of hatching, they're immense. The fear of the unknown, certainly, the pain of letting go of the familiar, the vulnerability of exposure, the sheer effort required for flight.
Yeah.
It's a transition from a closed, predictable world to an open, challenging one. And Lewis's analogy speaks to the irreversibility of true transformation, much like Bonhoeffer's call.
Yeah.
You can't unhatch, right?
Right.
Once you embark on this path, there's no going back to being merely an ordinary decent egg without risking going bad, becoming stagnant, bitter, or, spiritually dead. This transformation isn't just an additive, it's a complete existential shift. And we see a similar radical break from the past in Siddhartha's journey. The story of self-abandonment as depicted by Hermann Hesse. After years as an ascetic, Siddhartha experiences this profound shift in his understanding and identity. He realizes, but I am no longer the one I was. I am no ascetic anymore. I'm not a priest anymore. I'm no Brahmin anymore. He asks himself, whatever should I do at home and at my father's place? Study, make offerings, practice meditation. But all this is over. All of this is no longer alongside my path.
That passage really emphasizes the deep personal cost of radical transformation, doesn't it? Letting go of not just behaviors, but entire identities and roles that we once held dear. He's abandoning his past, his social standing, even his previous spiritual practices. It's a complete departure from familiarity in what was once considered a valid spiritual path. How does Bonhoeffer's idea of costly grace resonate with that kind of radical break?
Oh, it resonates profoundly because it shows that true transformation often requires letting go of who you think you are or who society tells you are. Siddhartha's realization that all this is over perfectly illustrates the cost of costly grace.
Yep.
It means accepting that your former self, with all its attachments and definitions, must essentially die for a new self to emerge.
Right.
This kind of transformation means you literally can't go back to who you were because that person, well, they no longer exist in the same way. Bonhoeffer's call to active obedience similarly means that your old passive self can no longer suffice. It has to give way. And Eckhart Tolle echoes this sentiment, doesn't he, in A New Earth, discussing the need to let go of self-definition.
Yeah, what does he say?
He says, give up defining yourself to yourself or to others. You won't die. You will come to life. Tolle explains that the ego plays roles because of an unexamined assumption, a fundamental error, which is this unconscious thought, I am not enough.
I am not enough. That's powerful.
It is. And it leads to further unconscious thoughts like, I need to play a role in order to get what I need to be fully myself. I need to get more so that I can be more. This constant striving is, in many ways, the opposite of the freedom that costly grace offers.
That's incredibly insightful. We often define ourselves by our roles, our achievements, our relationships, even our struggles. To let go of that sounds, well, terrifying to the ego, but profoundly liberating to the true self. This surrender of the ego, in a way, is the ultimate cost, isn't it?
Indeed. I think it highlights the internal cost of costly grace, surrendering the ego's pervasive need for definition and external validation, which, ironically, is often our most prized possession and the source of so much of our suffering. It's about realizing that, as Tolle puts it, in essence, you are neither inferior nor superior to anyone. This profound realization frees you from the constant striving of the ego to be more or better, allowing you to simply be. And this internal detachment is what allows for true active obedience, because your actions are no longer driven by egoic needs, but by a deeper, authentic calling.
This sounds like a lot of letting go. It's not just about what you do, but what you stop doing, what you stop holding on to. So what exactly are we letting go of, and how do we even begin such a profound process of detachment?
That's an excellent question, because detachment isn't about apathy or indifference, is it? It's about releasing attachment to things that hinder our spiritual growth. So this raises an important question. What forms does this detachment take, and how is it cultivated across various traditions? It's definitely not a singular act, but a multifaceted, ongoing process. In Christian mysticism, for example, St. John of the Cross speaks unequivocally about mortification and purity as essential steps on the path to union with God.
Mortification, that sounds intense.
It does, but here, mortification isn't really about physical harm in the way we might think. It's more about putting to death the ego, our self-will, our worldly attachments. He states, the soul cannot come to this union without great purity, and this purity is not gained without great detachment from every created thing and sharp mortification. And he uses this vivid imagery to make the point crystal clear. This is signified by the stripping of the bride of her mantle, and by her being wounded by night as she sought and went after the spouse. For the new mantle which belonged to the betrothal could not be put on till the old mantle was stripped off.
Wow, that image of stripping off the old mantle is so powerful, isn't it? It's not just discomfort, it's a profound, almost painful shedding of everything familiar for something entirely new. It sounds like a total commitment, a willingness to be exposed and vulnerable for the sake of a deeper union. How does that resonate with Bonhoeffer's call?
Oh, it resonates perfectly. This describes a path of intentional suffering and purification, not for its own sake, mind you, but as a necessary prerequisite for deeper union with the divine, a complete abandonment of the old self. It is a profound cost to the self, demanding that one actively unburden oneself of attachments to created things. And then you have the contemplative text, The Cloud of Unknowing, a guide for medieval mystics. It offers an even more radical form of detachment, instructing the seeker on singular focus.
Oh, so
It says, lift up thine heart unto God with a meek stirring of love, and mean himself and none of his goods. And thereto look the loath to think on anything but himself.
okay.
So that not work in thy mind, nor in thy will, but only himself.
Yeah.
And do that in thee is to forget all the creatures that ever God made and the works of them.
Forgetting all of creation except God, that's an incredible level of mental and spiritual discipline. It leaves no room for anything else, truly an ultimate detachment. It demands a constant conscious redirecting of thought and will. It speaks to the utter singularity of purpose.
Absolutely. This illustrative content offers an ultimate form of detachment, forgetting all of creation except God. It requires immense mental and spiritual discipline, a singular focus that leaves no room for anything else in one's mind or will. This is where the true demanding nature of costly commitment becomes evident. It's a proactive, ongoing renunciation of distractions, reinforcing Bonhoeffer's idea that true grace means putting Christ, or one's highest calling, at the absolute center of one's life. Now, moving to philosophical and yogic traditions, Seneca, the Roman Stoic.
Ah, Seneca.
Yes, and on the shortness of life, he provides a really practical roadmap for this kind of detachment that, anyone can apply, regardless of their specific spiritual path. He advises, let us get used to banishing ostentation and to measuring things by their qualities of function rather than display. Makes sense, right?
Practical.
Let us learn to increase our self-restraint, to curb luxury, to moderate ambition, to soften anger, to regard poverty without prejudice, to practice frugality. And he says to Cook, curb as if in fetters unbridled hopes, and a mind obsessed with the future, and to aim to acquire our riches from ourselves rather than from fortune.
That's a profound, practical, everyday application of detachment, actively choosing a life of internal richness by curtailing external desires. In our modern, consumer-driven world, that's a significant cost in itself. It's about finding satisfaction within rather than constantly grasping for external things or being driven by ambition and future worries.
It really is. This provides a practical, philosophical roadmap for living a life of internal richness by actively curtailing external desires, a significant cost in today's world. And then the Bhagavad Gita, a foundational text of Hindu philosophy, it further distinguishes two types of renunciation, offering clarity on what true detachment means.
Okay, what are they?
It says, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, which is sannyasa. And giving up the results of all activities is what the wise call renunciation, which is tyaga.
Okay, so sannyasa is more like asceticism, giving up certain activities altogether. And tyaga is about letting go of the results, the outcomes.
That's a good way to put it. Sannyasa refers to a life perhaps more focused on asceticism, while tyaga is about this inner detachment from outcomes, regardless of the activity.
So it's not necessarily about stopping all activity, but about changing the motive behind the activity, right? Like someone might continue their job, but instead of doing it solely for personal gain, they do it with a sense of service or as an expression of their transformed self. You're giving up actions driven purely by material desire and giving up the attachment to the results, but not necessarily the activities themselves if they're for, say, spiritual advancement or helping others.
Exactly. The Bhagavad Gita makes it very clear. While some activities purely driven by material desire should indeed be stopped, those activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge or contributing to the well-being of others, those are not to be given up. It's the intention behind the action and our detachment from the outcome that truly defines this kind of renunciation, this tyaga.
Right.
So working diligently is fine. Working solely for a bonus or becoming completely distraught if the bonus doesn't materialize, that's what the spiritual cost comes in. You're doing the work as an offering, perhaps, or as a duty, rather than being bound by its fruits. This demonstrates that costly grace doesn't mean inaction, but right action rooted in purified intention, actively choosing spiritual advancement over worldly outcomes. The Bhagavad Gita even describes the profound state achieved by this path: being purified by intelligence, existing in the mode of goodness, being a controller of the mind, not attached to the objects of sense gratification, having no false ego, being satisfied with everything that is offered to him by the grace of the Lord, and ultimately non-attached to all material things.
Wow.
Reaching the Brahma-Bhuta stage, this state of profound self-realization where one transcends material identification and experiences their true spiritual nature.
That's quite the transformation.
It outlines the extensive internal transformation as the profound reward for such rigorous renunciation and self-mastery, a clear parallel, I think, to the deep internal transformation Bonhoeffer envisions.
Okay, so it's becoming really clear that genuine transformation comes with a cost. A shedding of the old self, a discipline of desires, a fundamental reorientation of one's purpose. But, it seems incredibly easy to fall into a trap of seeking the benefits of spirituality or personal growth without truly paying the price. We want the grace without the cost. We want the outcome without the process.
That's absolutely right. And what's fascinating here is that the human tendency to seek comfort often leads us to inadvertently opt for a less transformative or implicitly cheap version of spiritual practice. We naturally gravitate towards the path of least resistance, don't we? Even when it comes to inner growth. It's just a deeply ingrained human characteristic to avoid discomfort. M. Scott Peck, in The Road Less Traveled, provides an excellent analogy for this illusion of effortless grace, this avoidance.
What's the analogy?
He describes a financial analyst who, when faced with personal problems, either makes the very first change that came to her mind within a matter of seconds, like a quick fix, or declares, "It's beyond me, what shall I do?"
Either jump to a solution or give up.
Exactly. Peck notes she was not willing to tolerate her discomfort long enough to analyze the problem.
That's a perfect analogy for cheap grace, isn't it? Desiring immediate relief or a quick solution without enduring the discomfort and the demanding intellectual or emotional labor required for true understanding and effective change. It's an avoidance of the cost of deep engagement. We just want the problem to go away, not to actually understand and resolve it at its root. That feels like a subtle but powerful form of self-deception.
Exactly. It's a fundamental avoidance of the cost of deep engagement. And Eric Fromm, in The Art of Loving, offers another powerful distinction that applies here. He talks about the difference between falling and standing in love.
Falling versus standing. Explain that.
Fromm distinguishes between the initial, often exhilarating experience of falling in love, that intense, consuming feeling, and the permanent state of being in love, or as we might better say, of standing in love. He notes that the falling type of love is by its very nature not lasting and can be killed by antagonism, their disappointments, their mutual boredom, the realities of a long-term relationship.
That applies so well to spiritual experiences too, doesn't it? Falling into grace might be that initial excitement, the honeymoon phase, where everything feels new and wonderful, maybe filled with consolations. But standing in grace, that requires something much more enduring, a sustained commitment even when the initial feelings fade. It's about enduring the antagonism and disappointments of the spiritual path itself, wouldn't you say, when it gets hard?
It does. We can definitely speculate that falling into grace might be that initial excitement, that burst of spiritual energy or insight, what some traditions call spiritual consolations. But standing in grace, like standing in love, requires sustained, conscious effort, a willingness to endure challenges and to confront those disappointments, those periods of aridity or struggle, without abandoning the underlying commitment. It demands persistence beyond the initial thrill, actively choosing to stay the course, even when it feels difficult, much like a seasoned marriage, as you said. And, the Top 7 Catholic Classics compilation directly addresses this danger of seeking only spiritual comfort. It warns against spiritual persons who often find themselves, spiritually speaking, very weak and imperfect. Why?
Why?
Because they're moved to these things and to these spiritual exercises by the consolation and pleasure that they find in them. They prioritize the feeling of spirituality over the substance of it.
So it's seeking gratification from the spiritual practices rather than engaging in them for a pure, unadulterated purpose. Using spirituality for personal comfort or pleasure rather than for true transformation. That goes right back to Bonhoeffer's distinction between comfort seeking and true obedience. It's a subtle but really significant difference in motivation, isn't it?
It is, and it's absolutely crucial. This directly addresses the pitfall of seeking gratification from spiritual practices rather than engaging in them for, say, the pure love of God. reinforcing Bonhoeffer's distinction. Similarly, the cloud of unknowing describes a love that is chaste and perfect, which, though it suffer allow that the body be fed and comforted in the presence of such sweet feelings and weepings, nevertheless yet it is not grumbling, but full well pleased for to lack them at God's will.
Wow. So true love is happy even without the good feelings, if that's God's will.
Exactly. It's a profound statement about the purity of motive required. Accepting arid periods without spiritual consolation, knowing that true love isn't dependent on pleasurable feelings. It's a love that's free from the ego's desires for comfort or reward.
So if we're not looking for shortcuts or just the feel-good parts, what does the active moment-by-moment work of embracing costly grace actually look like in our daily lives? How do we integrate this profound commitment without it just feeling like an insurmountable burden?
That's the million-dollar question for many seekers, isn't it? This raises the important question. How do we cultivate an active presence that integrates the demands of costly grace into daily life? And often it's not about grand gestures, but about consistent, conscious engagement with what is. Right here, right now, Michael A. Singer in The Untethered Soul speaks about the cleansing process of awareness as being central to this. He emphasizes the reason you built the whole mental structure was to avoid pain. If you let it fall apart, you're going to feel the pain that you were avoiding when you built it. You must be willing to face this pain. He frames our personal defenses as a kind of fortress that ultimately would not be protecting you, it would be imprisoning you.
A fortress that imprisons. That's a powerful and relatable image.
Isn't it? And the path to freedom, he says, is to let go and pass through the cleansing process that frees you from your psyche, by simply watching the psyche be the psyche.
Okay, so the cost of genuine spiritual growth, then, is confronting the very pain and fear we've spent our lives avoiding. But doing so through conscious observation, not reaction. That's a radical shift. Can you elaborate a bit on what watching the psyche be the psyche truly entails? What does that look like in practice?
It is indeed a radical shift. Watching the psyche be the psyche basically means observing your thoughts, your emotions, your inner reactions without identifying with them or judging them. It's like stepping back and witnessing the internal play of the mind without getting swept away by the drama.
Okay, like being the observer.
Exactly. This is the internal, often uncomfortable cost of genuine spiritual growth, confronting the pain and fear we've built defenses to avoid, but doing so through conscious observation rather than reactive engagement. And Singer further advises on the willingness to let experiences flow. He says, let your spiritual path become the willingness to let whatever happens make it through you, rather than carrying it into the next moment.
That sounds like a constant moment-by-moment commitment to non-resistance, doesn't it? Processing emotions and events without allowing them to create internal blockages, which seems like an ongoing cost of self-awareness itself. It's about not building new fortresses even as the old ones maybe start to crumble.
Absolutely. This is a constant moment-by-moment commitment to non-resistance. Processing emotions and events without allowing them to fester or create internal blockages. It's an ongoing cost of self-awareness, always choosing presence over reaction. And Eckhart Tolle, of course, in The Power of Now, elaborates on this beautifully. He advises, give attention to the present, give attention to your behavior, to your reactions, moods, thoughts, emotions, fears, and desires as they occur in the present.
Be aware of it all.
Yes. You are dealing with the past and dissolving it through the power of your presence. You cannot find yourself by going into the past. You find yourself by coming into the present. This describes the continuous active work of presence, making the present moment the primary point of engagement. And it's a demanding practice, make no mistake. Tara Brach, too, in Radical Acceptance, highlights the importance of befriending inner resistance. She acknowledges that, it is not always easy to feel compassionate in response to another's needs. Rather, we might feel resentful, imposed upon, disgusted, powerless, guilty, afraid.
Oh, those are difficult feelings.
That's very real. And she teaches that when our hearts harden in defense, it means we need to befriend what is happening inside us before compassion for others can naturally arise.
That's such a crucial point. Recognizing our own internal struggles first before we can genuinely extend compassion outward. It points to an internal cost of self-compassion and the emotional labor necessary to truly embody virtues like empathy. It means doing the difficult work of acknowledging our own less-than-ideal reactions rather than just pretending they don't exist or pushing them down.
It certainly does. This points to that internal cost of self-compassion and emotional labor necessary to truly embody virtues. It demands a level of honesty with oneself that is, let's face it, often uncomfortable. And the ancient text, the Philokalia, that foundational collection of writings from Eastern Christian mystics, it reinforces this need for active, disciplined practice. It states quite simply, if you want to be free of all the passions, practice self-control, love, and prayer.
Self-control, love, and prayer. Active practices.
Exactly. These are not passive desires, but active, disciplined practices that contribute to purity of heart and freedom from attachment. They form the bedrock of a life lived through costly grace. It's a holistic approach, really, where inner work and outward practice go hand in hand. They feed each other.
Okay, it seems really clear that Bonhoeffer's costly grace isn't just some intellectual idea. It's an invitation to an uncompromising life of deep commitment and transformation. So, what happens if we resist this call? What are the ultimate stakes if we cling to the easier path, to cheap grace? What's the downside?
That's a crucial question, because the stakes are indeed presented as very high. What does it truly cost us in the end to cling to self-will, to our ego's comfort? And conversely, what profound benefits await those who embrace the radical call of costly grace? C.S. Lewis, again, offers a really stark portrayal of the cost of refusing costly grace in The Great Divorce.
Ah, yes. What does he say there?
Through his teacher character, Lewis paraphrases Milton, saying, "The choice of every lost soul can be expressed in the words, 'Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.'"
Oof, reign in hell.
Yeah. There is always something they insist on keeping, even at the price of misery. There is always something they prefer to joy, that is, to reality.
That's a really chilling perspective. Choosing misery over joy, unreality over reality, simply because we refuse to let go of our own stubborn will or pride. He even likens it to a spoiled child, doesn't he? It paints a picture of ultimate self-imprisonment.
Yes, he does. He likens this to a spoiled child that would sooner miss its play and its supper than say it was sorry and be friends. Just pure stubbornness. And in adulthood, he says, this manifests as what he calls Achilles' wrath and Coriolanus' grandeur, revenge and injured merit and self-respect and tragic greatness and proper pride. All these ego defenses. It's a stark portrayal of the ultimate cost of choosing cheap grace, or self-will, perpetual misery and separation from joy, all rooted in pride. The passage emphasizes that darkness cannot now infect our light, highlighting the uncompromising nature of reality and divine love. It's a choice that ultimately isolates us from true joy and connection. For Lewis, just as for Bonhoeffer, the refusal to pay the cost isn't a neutral act. It's a profound self-harm that separates us from reality itself.
That's a powerful image of the consequences of holding on to our self-will, even when it leads to suffering and isolation.
Yeah.
But what about the rewards? For those who do commit to this demanding path, what does true costly grace ultimately yield? Is it just constant struggle, or is there a deeper fulfillment beyond the perceived cost?
Ah, that's the beautiful counterpoint to the cost, isn't it? If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cost of authentic commitment leads not to deprivation or unending struggle, but actually to a deeper, richer form of fulfillment and connection than anything the world can offer. It leads to a profound sense of inner peace and union, a joy that is not fleeting or dependent on external circumstances. St. John of the Cross, for instance, in Dark Night of the Soul, speaks to this journey in purity and union with God. He notes that those periods of aridities, the dryness,
Yeah, the difficult times.
right, they actually cause the soul to journey in all purity in the love of God, since it is no longer influenced in its actions by the pleasure and sweetness of the actions themselves, but only by a desire to please God.
So those dry, difficult periods aren't punishments, but they actually purify our motives, making our actions about pure love for God rather than seeking spiritual comfort or pleasure. It's like a stripping away of all the superficial motivators until only pure devotion remains.
Precisely. And the Philokalia describes how, through this purification, human desire is changed into pleasure through his soul's unsullied union in grace with the divine. And that insensitiveness, maybe like righteous anger or passion, is changed into a pure fervor, shielding his pleasure in the divine, and into a self-possessed frenzy in which the soul, ravished by longing, is totally wrapped in ecstasy above the realm of created beings.
Wow, that's intense. A transformation of desires and passions into divine rapture.
It depicts a profound transformation of natural human impulses, even things like passion and anger, redirecting them toward ultimate spiritual union. Your desires aren't suppressed, but rather sublimated and purified, finding their ultimate satisfaction in a divine connection. And the top 7 Catholic classics promises that he who struggleth and has attained intimacy with God, who has shared in his holy light and has been wounded by love for him, it is he who rejoices in a certain unattainable spiritual delight in the Lord.
Unattainable spiritual delight. That's a beautiful phrase. It suggests a joy that cannot be found or fabricated through worldly means. It suggests that the suffering and struggle inherent in costly grace are not ends in themselves, but pathways to a joy and intimacy with the divine that is far beyond any worldly pleasure or fleeting comfort. It's the ultimate reward, perhaps, for the ultimate cost.
That's the essence of it, I think. This suggests that the suffering and struggle inherent in costly grace are not ends in themselves, but pathways to an unattainable spiritual delight and true intimacy with the divine. A deeper satisfaction than any worldly pleasure could provide. This isn't just happiness. It's a profound, lasting joy rooted in communion. And Joseph Campbell, discussing marriage as a metaphor for ultimate commitment and the power of myth, he offers an insight that applies directly to this idea of ultimate spiritual union and purpose. He explains, if the marriage isn't a first priority in your life, you're not married. Strong words.
Very strong.
The marriage means the two that are one, the two become one flesh. But then he clarifies that this is primarily spiritually. The biological is the distraction which may lead you to the wrong identification.
That's a profound statement about the nature of true commitment, isn't it? Whether it's to another person in a sacred bond, or to a spiritual path, or to your deepest purpose, the cost of prioritizing that union above all else is what makes it real and lasting. The biological or superficial distractions are the cheap grace equivalent in this analogy, constantly hindering that profound oneness. It perfectly encapsulates the idea that without making something your absolute first priority, you haven't truly committed.
It absolutely is. This highlights that the cost of prioritizing a spiritual union, whether with God, with your deepest purpose, or with another in a sacred sense, is absolutely essential for that union to be real and lasting. The distractions of the biological or the superficial are the cheap grace equivalent in this analogy, constantly hindering the profound oneness that is the ultimate goal. And the Philokalia reinforces this idea through the ultimate model, describing how being master, he became a servant and so revealed to the world the depths of his providence, and how God, the Logos, in becoming incarnate while remaining unchanged, was united through his flesh with the whole of creation.
So the ultimate sacrifice becomes the ultimate model.
Exactly. This profound act of divine humility and sacrifice becomes the ultimate model for costly grace. A complete identification with humanity and creation, demonstrating the ultimate depth of commitment and the limitless rewards of such self-giving love. Hashtag, outro.
So where does this leave us? What does this all mean for us today? Bonhoeffer's radical call to costly grace, illuminated by these profound insights from across different wisdom traditions. It isn't about rigid adherence to dogma, is it? Or feeling guilty for seeking comfort. It seems to be about the profound and often challenging journey toward authentic transformation, a journey that ultimately offers incredible, unparalleled rewards.
That's right. When we connect this to the bigger picture, we've seen that whether it's through Bonhoeffer's emphasis on active obedience, or St. John of the Cross's call to mortification and purity, Seneca's philosophical roadmap for self-restraint, or maybe Eckhart Tolle's and Michael Singer's focus on present moment awareness and letting go of the ego. The common thread is a deep, often uncomfortable commitment that moves far beyond superficiality. It really is about choosing the path of being hatched over remaining an ordinary, decent egg, to borrow C.S. Lewis's vivid image one last time.
It really asks us to look closely at our own lives, doesn't it? Are we, maybe in subtle ways, in our own pursuits of meaning and well-being, inadvertently seeking the ease of cheap grace? Are we wanting the reward without the real, often difficult work? The detachment, the self-renunciation, the constant presence, the willingness to face discomfort, the things that truly transform us. Are we prioritizing convenience over profound change?
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to ponder. What cost are you truly willing to pay for a life that is authentically aligned with your deepest purpose or highest calling? And conversely, what might be the real cost of avoiding that demanding path by opting for the easier, less transformative one? What in your life might be a fortress that you've built to avoid pain, which is now, in fact, as Singer puts it, imprisoning you?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Bonhoeffer's radical call for costly grace. We hope this exploration has given you something truly provocative to consider as you navigate your own journey of commitment and transformation.